In this video, I share my top 10 tips for emotional literacy. Tips that will help you become even more emotionally literate or intelligent. So let's start with tip number 1. Understand that emotions are a normal part of being a human being and that we all have them. Never try and pretend that you don't have emotions, even though sometimes this world seems like it's trying very hard to ignore the fact that we all have emotions. Emotions are often ignored because we live in a very logical world that doesn't want to think about how emotions can cause difficulties or have to spend time dealing with them. It's not helpful to ignore feelings. We need to understand that they can be powerful things that sometimes need our focus or attention. If we pretend they're not there, they cause more difficulties than if we accept them and try to get better at understanding and managing them. If we ignore them, they tend to still affect us, but in unpredictable ways. Ignoring feelings means we can end up bottling them up, which is a way of saying trying to put them away without dealing with them. This might seem like an easier thing to do than dealing with them, but it usually means they burst out somewhere in our lives in an uncontrolled or random way. Tip number 2. Never think of emotions as good or bad. Although when we experience enjoyable emotions like happiness, we do tend to be easier to be around, feeling happy does not make us good. And likewise, when we're experiencing unenjoyable emotions like worry or anger, this can sometimes make us a little bit more tricky to be around and less easy to be around. But that does not mean we're bad. All emotions are acceptable and we can get better at managing them. Healthy emotions simply come and then go. And to do that, we need to just get on and feel and accept them without thinking of them as good or bad. Thinking of them as good or bad can cause us problems. So for example, if we think of jealousy as a bad emotion, we don't just feel jealousy when we feel it, we also feel some shame for feeling it. If happiness is labelled as good, we might try always to feel happy to get approval, and that's a really unrealistic expectation. It can also mean that we can have feelings of shame for not feeling happy all of the time. The idea of emotions being good or bad can make our processing of emotions more complicated and therefore make emotions less likely to come and go quickly. Healthy emotions do exactly that. They come and go quite quickly. It's when they get stuck that they can cause us serious well-being difficulties. Tip number 3. As humans, we should expect to feel both unenjoyable and enjoyable emotions. It would be unrealistic to expect to feel enjoyable emotions like happiness all the time. Unenjoyable emotions are a normal part of life and they will turn up every now and then, and we shouldn't panic when they do so, especially when we get good at managing them. It might seem really obvious that we can't feel joy or happiness all of the time, but sometimes we can feel a pressure to appear happy all of the time. This pressure can come from things like being told off if we look miserable, being told getting angry is wrong. Well, getting angry is not wrong, but getting aggressive is usually wrong, but that's a behaviour, not an emotion. Pressure to seem happy can also come from getting praised when we look cheerful, adverts where everyone looks happy all of the time, and social media where most people post pictures of themselves having a really good time and looking happy. This could lead us to think that our aim was to be joyful or happy all of the time. The reality is, this is simply not possible. As humans, we feel a wide range of both enjoyable and unenjoyable emotions. Tip number 4. One way of becoming more emotionally literate quite quickly is to do what I call emotion check-ins. And these are simply times when you can ask yourself, what am I feeling? Or perhaps at the end of the day, what different emotions did I feel today? Or even, how do I feel about something that happened today? If you do these, they will help you get better at recognising what you're feeling and what triggers different emotions inside of you. This will also help you get better at knowing yourself.
Emotion check-ins can be done in lots of different ways. You can just ask yourself how you're feeling, but you could also help yourself to really think about your emotions by using a prompt like an emotion poster. We can add emotion words to the poster as we learn more. The more words we have to describe emotions, the better we become at expressing exactly what we are feeling. That's a bit like a tip within a tip. But the more emotion check-ins we have, the better we get at recognising what we are feeling and identifying what might have triggered whatever it is we are feeling.
Tip number 5. It's important to understand that when we're experiencing a powerful emotion, we're unlikely to make our best choices or decisions. It's good to remember that when we're experiencing a powerful emotion, it's wise to stop and take time before we react.
When you're feeling a powerful, unenjoyable emotion like anger, embarrassment or shame, it can make you vulnerable to reacting in a way that makes the situation worse. If you get good at noticing that a strong, unenjoyable emotion has arrived, you can get better at stopping yourself from reacting immediately. It can take some practice though. Sometimes when an emotion is particularly powerful, you need to do something like breathe deeply, count down from 10, or take yourself away from the situation to prevent yourself from reacting in a way that makes the situation worse.
Tip number 6. It's important to remember that although we can't generally help what we feel, we can always choose how we behave. So although emotions can turn up quite suddenly and surprise us, whatever we're feeling, we can become good at learning to behave in ways that certainly don't make a situation worse, or better still, actually help to sort out the situation.
When you feel angry, even though anger can feel like it's completely taken over, you still have control over what you end up doing. So say for example someone became angry after they were insulted. Although they feel angry, they have a choice about what they end up doing in response. So for example, the different ways they could respond could include hitting the person, insulting them back, shrugging and walking away. They could agree with the insult in a sort of jokey way. This is called fogging, and it works surprisingly well to confuse the person who gave the insult. They could go and tell an adult, or they could state how they're feeling. I feel upset when people insult me. There's probably never one right response to any situation, but some responses will definitely make the situation worse. The thing to aim for is that you are in control of your response. The more aware you become about emotions, the better you will become at choosing a positive thing to do.
Tip number 7. Try to never blame others for how you are feeling, as this rarely sorts anything out. Other people's behaviour can trigger emotions in you, but they are your emotions and it's down to you to manage them. This might not seem very true, but if I give you an example, it'll help you understand this.
These two people have experienced the same thing, but both are having a different emotional response. Emotional responses are also linked to what a person is thinking when something happens. So I've shown what these two people are thinking as well as what they're feeling. This shows that our emotions are unique to us. We can't assume that everyone will feel the same emotions as we do when the same things happen to us. Because of this, it seems unfair to simply always blame other people for the responses and reactions that we have. We need to take some responsibility for managing how we feel and how we react.
Tip number 8. Learn to use I messages when you express how you feel, particularly when you're experiencing unenjoyable emotions. There are good reasons for this. But first, an example of an I message is, I feel angry when people call me names. That's much better than you made me angry. So let's have a look at the reasons for this.
Here are two examples of different ways that you could say that you were angry. Can you see how it would feel quite different to be told by another person, you made me angry, compared with, when people insult me, I feel angry? The second way of saying that you're angry is an I message. I messages are better because they don't accuse anyone of anything. This is good because when people are accused of something, they get defensive and they're likely to fight back. I messages are better also because the other person can't really argue with you because all you've done is say how you feel. And I messages are also better because you're owning your emotion by saying it's what you do in response to something, and therefore not blaming someone else for how you feel. I messages are easy to create. Start with how you feel and add when, and then state what triggered your emotion. They can also be used to acknowledge general triggers. So for example, I feel worried when we have to have a different teacher, or I get upset when things get cancelled, or I feel embarrassed when I have to stand up and talk to lots of people. I messages help you to link how you feel to its trigger.
Tip number 9. When you see someone having an emotional response, try really hard to empathise. Empathy, or empathising, is where you imagine yourself in somebody else's situation and you consider and imagine what they might be feeling. Empathising, or empathy, is always a good starting point when someone's experiencing a strong emotion, as empathy can make us kinder and more tolerant of other people.
Imagine we see someone expressing how angry they are. Their voice is loud, they look tense, they're stood up, they're looking full of energy, their fists are clenched, and their face is screwed up. We can react in different ways depending on our personality and how we've seen other people react to anger and how uncomfortable it makes us feel. It's normal for other people's emotions to have an effect on us, and quite often when someone is emotionally distressed, we don't always know what to do. Sometimes other people's strong emotions make us feel awkward, they can scare us, they make us feel embarrassed, they can sometimes make us want to avoid the person, and sometimes that awkwardness might even make us laugh, or it can make us feel very, very uncomfortable. When someone else is showing strong emotions, we can sometimes be more worried about how we are feeling than about how they are feeling. So a really good place to start is to simply wonder why they are feeling what they're feeling, and do your best to try and understand. This is empathising, or showing empathy. Even if the trigger for their anger would not trigger anger for you, trying to understand what's going on for them is one of the kindest things you can do, and this is most important when it is someone that you care about.
Tip number 10. Work out coping strategies or plans that will help you when you're experiencing an unenjoyable emotion. Emotions can be really tricky things, but we can all get better at learning to manage them. So when we feel unenjoyable emotions, we usually have things that help us feel better or help us cope while we're experiencing the unenjoyable emotion, but we can always have things that we add to our list of coping plans.
To some extent, different emotions need different coping strategies. However, some things that help us to feel better will help us with all unenjoyable emotions. Thinking about coping strategies that work for us is time well spent. Different people will find different things work for them. It's good to try out different things and see what helps you with unenjoyable emotions.
So what have we learnt? Well, we've learnt lots of different things, and some of these things are covered in more detail in some of the other videos that I've made.